even though we've had loss, it's a strong family unit that gives me a lot of confidence. And I just can't say enough about that family unit, whatever that definition is for you, but really being able to communicate well there, and that translates out into society.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Produced by Media Minefield, the show is hosted by Christy Peel, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
We all have things that happen in our lives we can't control, and how we deal with them has lifelong impact. This is a common thread on the podcast because so many major no-going-back life events force us to flip our scripts. Oftentimes, those things happen when we're adults. Today's story is one of an event of loss that happened to our guest when she was a child, and how that has impacted her life professionally and personally, and how she has been able to be a better stepmother, which is a word she's going to tell you she doesn't like, and be a better business owner and navigate through the challenging times and the challenging conversations we're having in our world today. And she says she learned those things because her father died when she was just 11 years old. Today's guest is Roshini Rajkumar. She's flipped her script several times in her life. She's been a TV news reporter across the country, a radio host, a talk show host, and an executive coach. Roshini, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Christy. It's just a pleasure to be with you. And what a great concept you have in this podcast.
Thank you. And the response has been so great because I think there are conversations that are best had in the version of a podcast because we have some time. And even though the stories are different and not everyone is going to have the same experience, the theme is the same. And the beauty that we can take from that is the same. So in thinking about you and all that you've done, and you've been pretty public about a lot of different parts of your life, there's something that happened when you were a child that has impacted you for decades. And you're at a point where there's value in talking about that to give value to someone else. So why don't you start in with your childhood?
Right. Well, and I think in different settings and even sometimes on the air, I've talked about this, but I haven't really dived into it in a detailed way because especially when I was a TV reporter, I didn't want the story to be about me. It wasn't really relevant for it to come up. And now occasionally here and there, if it's relevant, it may come up on the radio during my talk show. But at the age, I was 11, actually 3 weeks before I turned 12, and my brother was 9, we lost our father. And he had a 2-year battle with colon cancer. So we went through some chemo and some radiation. But there we were. My mom was only 38 years old. My dad was 40 when my father died. And she was very dedicated to us. And I think at the time, we were already a close family. You become even closer. Could have gone the other direction. So I give her a lot of credit for making sure it didn't. And we just got stronger. But in the years since, my brother and I talk about it on and off, how that was such a pivotal moment in our lives because it was a major loss, and I was such a daddy's little girl that it really was, to be that age. It's such a yucky age for kids and especially for girls to lose your father. And, it was helpful that he was such a proponent of both me and my brother, but definitely pushing me, a proponent of me. And, he left leaving me with that attitude that I could do anything. And that was a gift, a big gift.
So he was sick for a while, you mentioned. Did you know that he wouldn't be able to survive the cancer fight?
I didn't, because when they found that original tumor when he was 38, it was a time, in the early 80s when we did not know what we know now about colon cancer. So it was so progressed, and they removed that tumor and got him started on treatment, but then another tumor came back. But in my child's mind, it never crossed my mind he would die. It really didn't. I don't know that I really thought that far ahead, but it was a close family friend. This couple that was very close had known my parents since they came to the United States and had known me since I came to the United States at a young age. They took me aside. The woman, in fact, took me aside and sort of shared with me that I had to start preparing for this. So that was the first sort of reality check moment. But even then, I still didn't think it was going to happen.
That's one of the beautiful things about children, isn't it? There's always the fairy tale ending, and the seeing your parents as superheroes that can do anything. For most children, that's their reality. So even when your dad was fighting it, I can see as an 11-year-old girl believing that, and then he gets better. And then we do this.
Right. And you just don't think that. And it is such a harsh thing to happen to two kids and our mom. She was a business owner, actually. Thank goodness she had her Montessori school. So she did have a way to provide for us. And, you just move forward. And like looking back, I sometimes don't know how she did it. She was so selfless, especially when, you're dealing with two preteen kids who aren't always the best, frankly, if we think of who we were when we were, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, those weren't our brightest days all the time, right?
And she has to deal with her grief and your grief and running a business and doing all the things. And it sounds like what your dad gave you as a gift was a mindset that you can do whatever you set your mind out to, which has impacted your life. What about your mom? How did she get through those hard years? Because even in an ideal family, not that there is such a thing, those years are the toughest probably ones there are to have kids in your house and then to be going through something so difficult herself.
Exactly. I don't really know how she did it because it probably was very lonely to, come to this country when she did, not far into her marriage to my father. In fact, the first, they came to this country, I was eight months when they left Sri Lanka, and the Sri Lankan government wouldn't let them bring me with them. So we were actually apart for 14 months. And then I came here when I was almost 2. So, she came with my father in the early 70s thinking, okay, we're starting a new life. And then, within about 11 to 12 years of that, I think about 11 years of coming to this country, she loses him. And that was unexpected. Luckily, she had started a business, but, she had to move forward. And we had only been, by the time my dad died, my mother, he and I had only been citizens of the United States for not very long. So he died in 1982. I had been a citizen for just about 2 years. So they hadn't even been citizens for very long. And then he died. And, I just don't even know. We definitely became close. She says now she really focused on us and we were a big part of her healing. But I just cannot imagine it, Christy. I just can't.
And the older that you get, and as you have gotten married, have relationships, you see what your mother went through in a completely different light. Has it really changed looking back on it now that you're older?
Yeah, I mean, it has. I'm, even more grateful for what she went through. I can look back at, some of my own attitudes and how tough I must have made it on her because I had lost like my dad, and I was just in my own grief for a while there, but you don't even know that's what's happening while you're living it as a 12-year-old. But I can look back on that and, I'm just so grateful to her.
So you go through your teenage years healing, and in the 80s, mental health wasn't as mainstream as it is today. So you didn't have professional help. You got through this with your mother and your brother and those around you. What were the biggest impacts that losing your dad had as you navigated difficult things like dating and going to school?
And I joke, I really do say this jokingly, that Asians really just don't do counseling. And that was true. I didn't know that at the time, but we probably should have gone to counseling to deal with things, both my mother and my brother and me as young people. But so who knows, if there might have been a little more of a smooth ride towards some of the healing. But luckily, we had some wonderful people around us, whether it was family or family friends who were like family. And even, the classmates that we both grew up with, I think have been terrific in that. But yeah, I mean, you just it's a whole different experience. Dating, I mean, I think my dad, had he been around, actually would have been stricter than my mom was. So that's probably one of those things. But, just knowing that there was a lot of expectations on us as kids and to succeed, that is probably the biggest takeaway, that you'd be letting the family down. And that's very South Asian, it's a very South Asian thing. But I can say that there are so many parts of both my parents that I think live on in both of us, and how we look at things, and how we sort of go forward, and we're very proactive and really do try to excel. And some of that is because I grew up in Edina, and that was one of the gifts of Edina. There are certainly some bad stereotypes about Edina, Minnesota, but one of the good ones is it is definitely about excelling and using all your gifts. And I think that was a really great place. I say there are no coincidences. It was a complete, not my parents' choice that they ended up in Edina, but that turned out to be the right place for us to grow up.
What did losing your father teach you about resiliency?
I just don't think you can let anything get you down. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. I feel like if I've survived that, and there definitely have been some low moments, other tragedies in my life, but that was probably one of the worst things ever that could have happened. And so for that to happen at that young age, yes, that is so sad and tragic, but for it to happen at that young age, it also gave me and my brother the gift of how important life is. Every day is a gift. I mean, we celebrate birthdays in a big way. Heck, I just celebrate having a great happy hour with friends. I mean, every day can be its own celebration for different reasons. And I do think that big loss at a young age really helped me see that, helps my brother see that. And that was a profound effect of such a negative loss.
When you went through your teenage years and the years right after your father passed away, Father's Day must have been just deeply difficult for you at the time. Is it still painful?
It's not as painful, I think, as it used to be. I think it's more, I can celebrate. And, I've been married for a few years. I inherited 2 daughters. And so Father's Day for me is also now about my husband. My brother has become a father. So it's about him too. My cousins on my mom's side are all fathers. So there are people that I can celebrate and, remember my dad in a really good way.
And when you think about your dad in a couple of sentences, like what are the gems from him that you want to instill maybe in other people? Or when you think about him, is there one thing that you really hold on to?
Boy, you're going to make me kind of emotional now. I think of this line, and I don't know if he ever said it or because he lived it. It was always put things back the way you found them, or better than you found them. And I don't know why I'm getting so emotional saying that right now, but I think that has really informed my life, as my past life as a reporter, my current life as an executive coach and talk show host, using my platforms and using my talent to try to make things better than I found them. Whether that's someone who comes to me for my advice and wants help with their personal brand as an executive, or when I'm on the airwaves and able to talk about topics that are really tough, and I'm not afraid to take them on, and I'm not afraid to be disagreed with. I can take the heat. And recently I have taken the heat for some things because I've stood up for finding the facts and not being distracted by different narratives that are out there. So that is really a big part. And it's, interesting that you asked me that question, because I think even very recently, I see that really was the seed for why I am the way I am. And sometimes I tick off my own family because I am so about the facts, and I don't like revisionist history, and I don't like distraction, and I don't like it when even small details get short-circuited, or people try to put the blame in the wrong place. I get very frustrated with that. And I've, unfortunately over the years, not many, but I've lost a couple friends because I've been very true to the facts, and that's just who I am, and I can't be different from that.
That mindset is a gift that he gave you, that's something that is with you in all situations, because that little, comment really applies to a lot of different areas. But I love it as you talk about, journalism and getting to the facts, because in the environment we live in, there's a lot of conversation about bias and fake news and journalists having agendas. And so it's refreshing. And I think people will enjoy hearing you talk a little bit about your mindset, in that it's about the facts and only the facts, no matter what, even if that frustrates or upsets people, or you have to take heat because you're so focused on the facts.
Yeah. And when I was a TV news reporter, and at that time I would have called myself, I was a journalist, it was important that I was really all about the facts and getting stories and facts from all different sides and all different parts of the story. Now, as a talk show host where I can have an opinion, I'm paid to have an opinion, the facts are important, because even if I have an opinion and you know that I'm maybe subjective on something or have that opinion, whereas in the past as a reporter, you hopefully did not know my opinion. I was just reporting. But now when I have an opinion, I also want to stand on the facts so that people don't think I'm just saying things just to say things or sensationalize. They're truly rooted in the facts. So that will always be important to me. And I believe my record stands for itself, that I'm pretty unflappable when it comes to wanting the facts, wanting to put the facts out there. And am I ever wrong? Absolutely. And it's not because I'm trying to be. I may not have all the facts, and I'm going to always try to look for them.
Thinking about your dad and thinking about his impact on your life, he impacted your career, he impacted the trajectory of your life. And your mother, as we were talking about her, she healed and remarried. And that was an impact on you. Can you share a little bit about what that journey was like as well?
Yeah, she remarried about 10 years later, and John came into our lives maybe 4 to 5 years after my dad died. And so he was in our lives. It wasn't really clear to me that that was her boyfriend. Again, it's an Asian thing. It wasn't like she was putting labels on it, but it was pretty clear to my friends and my brother's friends that was the case. And so at some point they got engaged, and right before I started my senior year of college, they got married. And so I gained a stepdad. So in the tragedy of losing a parent, I gained a parent, and definitely didn't like the term stepdad, but sometimes that's just the term you have to use. But I always say that, I had 3 parents, and that's kind of what it was.
And him coming into a family that was made but had so much loss. How did he navigate that, and what did you learn from him?
I don't know how he navigated it, because I don't know that I was necessarily, at least once they got married, I don't know that I was always the model stepdaughter. We navigated our own kind of getting to know you once I graduated college, and I lived with them for 2 years, my first year between college and law school, and then my first year of law school, I lived with them. And we definitely, had some moments that will remain between us. Maybe my mom heard about them, but I think that was part of the learning process. John had never been married before, and he didn't have his own kids or his own biological kids. We definitely became his kids. So that might have helped, and he really did take us on as a threesome, and definitely we became his family. And I don't remember every little detail, but I do know that I probably had to work through more issues than it seemed my brother did. And maybe it was because my brother was 2 years behind me in grades, and he got to see them kind of in that dating life that I didn't really see and before they got engaged. 2018 Father's Day was the final time we had a big family meal at a restaurant. My husband and I, our older daughter, my mom, John, and my brother and sister-in-law. And we had this meal, and then about a couple days later, because he had an LVAD device, which is an outside device that helped his heart going. A couple days later, some of his readings were off, so they checked him to the hospital. And they had been talking with him about possibly, getting a newer device, because that was from 2016, September. So this was June of 2018. And they talked about, do you want a new device? And he went back and forth. He's like, I don't want them to open me up. I might die. And then he's like, oh yeah, I do want it. So he did end up decide to do it. And the last day I spoke with him was July 5th of 2018, the day before the surgery. So they went into surgery and some things were off. There was an infection, a sac of infection they didn't know was there that they had to deal with. And then eventually they could do the surgery on the LVAD. So they did that, but then his system started shutting down. And he was on machines for a long time. And he and my mom both have directives to do all possible things, like drastic measures. So that was really tough because my mom didn't want to stop the machines and she wanted to talk to him again, even if he was going to go. And every time they'd bring him out of sedation, another thing would shut down. So they had to put him back. And I mean, and then just got to talk about, crucial conversation between my husband, my brother, sister-in-law, and I was the only one who was like, we all agreed, but I was the only one who'd be like, Mom, that's just like, it's not right. It's unethical. The doctors have tried everything. They adore him. He's been this patient at this hospital and they've tried everything. And so it was very hard for her. But ultimately the machines were turned off at the end of August of 2018. So it was like tough to see her become a widow again, and then just how that played out. And, and it reminds you that, that conversation on July 5th, I'll always cherish. And that Father's Day that year, our last time, together having fun. He was sneaking all these pitas and we just like, you can't eat all that bread. So, it really goes back to valuing and cherishing each moment.
You never know.
You never know. And, initially I couldn't really grieve because I was so worried about my mom, and she was so social and they did so many things together. They just, and then you're just like, wow, you don't want her to be lonely and things like that. So,
well, and the roles really switched because when your father passed away, she had to probably put her grief on hold to take care of you. And then when John passed away, you had to put your grief on hold to take care of her. It just came really full circle in a tragic way.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to sound like some kind of martyr at all, because I didn't even know that was happening until like months later when I would have these moments grieving him. And I'm like, I think it's because I just really didn't get to do this at the end of 2018. My brother and I both spoke at his funeral, which was at Basilica. And there was some healing in that, and I wrote the obituary. So those are some of those things that you don't plan for that, right? But I have such respect for him as an additional parent that I think that is part of what he gives me now.
The traditional family definition that, we saw in the sitcoms in the 80s is really not most people's experience. Most people's experience is not a mom, a dad, children, and it stays with those same people the entire journey. That is not most people's experience. What nuggets did you learn in going through losing your father, bringing someone else in, and accepting John? Because John eventually, you ironed out the issues and you really became family to you, not just because of your mom's marriage, but because he became family, which isn't about a marriage certificate. What advice do you have to people who are navigating that, whether it's the children or the parents, because so many people have disruptions in their family?
It's so important to communicate. And, I say that as a communication coach, but often with our families, that's the hardest time. Like I joke that my mom is the last person who takes my communication advice. All these different executives take my advice, but my mom does not. But it is so important to communicate and do it once you get if you're angry or if you're frustrated or if you're in a high level of emotion, try to get some of that out first on your own, go for a run, do whatever you need to do, and then really try to have those honest conversations. And today, in our world, whether it's family or coworkers or other kinds of things, as the world deals with systemic racism, we need to have those courageous conversations. And it really does start in the family. And I feel that I'm able to go out into the world and have those conversations or even guide them for other people because I have such a strong family unit. And even though we've had loss, it's a strong family unit that gives me a lot of confidence. And so I just can't say enough about that family unit, whatever that definition is for you, but really being able to communicate well there. And that translates out into society.
Fantastic. I want to rewind it. Like, let's just play that again. Let's listen to that again because there was a lot there. And all that you lived through with your mom and your dad and John then you became the parent role when you married your husband and you call them your daughter friends because of so how did what you learned translate to make you a better mom friend? Is that the right word?
Yes, thank you. That is what I call myself. And, because they have a terrific mom and they have a stepdad, and that stepdad came into the scene before I did. So I'd like to think we've sort of become, the four of us, a parental unit, and I met my daughter friends when they were 12 and 15. So they've been in my life now for more than 10 years. And I love them, but I'm not trying to be their mom. And hopefully they sort of look at this parental unit as an enhanced kind of group of four people who just adore them and want their success. And I think we are fortunate in that is the case for the four of us. I know that is not the case for all situations when there's, biological and step parents on the scene, but it really is something that's a blessing in my life. And it starts with the fact that my husband and their mother from the beginning, long before I came on the scene, when they split up, they made life about their daughters, and that's translated, and that's something that's very beautiful to watch. And in fact, recently our younger daughter graduated from college, and as you know, COVID affected all graduation ceremonies for the class of 2020. So we were able to do a small private ceremony for her in my mother's backyard, and it involved family from both sides, and all three sides now: my side, her mom's side, her dad's side, and the four people parental unit was there. And it was wonderful taking a picture with her in the middle. And that's how it's been for, they're both of their high school and college graduations. The parental unit's been there. And then they both stood up and were part of the wedding party, and stood up with my husband for our wedding in July of 2016. And that was a really beautiful moment. In fact, the older one was his witness on our wedding marriage license. So it's nice when you can have that, and you'd have to ask them, I don't know if there were any bumpy parts for them, but you just navigate things. And when you want to have harmony and you have an intention, which is so important, what's the intention? And my intention is that we all can have peace and respect and harmony. And it takes all of us. And sometimes it takes communication through various moments. But I would say the fact that I lived through what I lived through with John, he was an inspiration to me in how I am this additional parent for them. And it's a little different situation because he came into our threesome and we had suffered great loss. And, my daughter friends had their own loss from their past, but they were very little. So I don't think they remember much of that. But they have been very welcoming with me. And I'm just so happy that the four of us as a parental unit can love these two young women so much.
So much about communication. I imagine when you approached even them the first time you met them, you probably were intentional about your communication and intentional about the relationship, and probably spent some quality time talking to your boyfriend at the time about what this would look like, because you do believe so deeply in communication and intentionality and authenticity. And those, you can never, you only have one opportunity to make a first impression. And I suspect that when you met them for the first time and you made the choice to move forward with the relationship and include them, that must have been a really pivotal point because of who you are and how you think about communication.
Right. And in fact, I was introduced to them way earlier than I think in retrospect I would have advised. But my now husband and I had such a strong reaction to each other. It was very close to love at first sight. And so the fact that he wanted me to meet them so quickly just reinforced the fact that his feelings were strong. And I believe they saw how strong our feelings were for each other. And whenever they came to it on their own, they really respect the fact that, here's a woman who really loves our dad. And our older daughter gave a toast at our wedding reception, and it was really quite lovely. And there were some words that were said about just kind of how she believes that I and her father kind of balance each other out. And it was one of the first times I've heard her sort of describe why she thought we were good together. And that was really beautiful. It was really nice. And their mother and stepfather were at our wedding reception. So that was also very special.
And pretty unusual. So you must have done a lot of work in that relationship to get to the point where that was comfortable for everyone.
Yeah. And I asked my husband, or at the time, my fiance, and he said, it's really up to you. I said, actually, it's up to you. And I said, well, I'll check with the girls. And if they think it's weird, we won't do it. And they did not think it was weird. So they were not at the ceremony, but they were at the reception. So it was really lovely that they got to see our older daughter give that toast. And my in-laws, who were, the former in-laws of their mother, were there, and we all get along great and toast together, eat and drink together. And that is, I think, really just good for our daughters.
And we've talked about the personal side of Flip Your Script, which you've navigated. The professional side, you've had some loss there as well, and you continue you're like a phoenix. You reinvent yourself. So talk about the things the characteristics, I guess, that helped you to be able to do that. And some of it sounds like came from your personal experience, but you have to have just fire in the belly as well.
Yes, you do. And, it helps to be a firstborn, maybe type A personality that, you just have to keep going. But my first career was as a television news reporter. And that was even a surprise for many, because I went to my undergraduate years to college planning to be an attorney, a trial attorney. And pretty much my last semester of college at Boston College, I decided I wanted to go into TV news. And this was not a really big bright spot for my mother, because when you're South Asian, you're really expected to be an engineer or a doctor, not even a lawyer. And I was planning to be a lawyer. So she had to sort of get her mindset around, okay, she's not going to be a lawyer. But I said, look, I want to go to law school still, and court TV was sort of newish when I was of that age. And I sort of visualized this merging of law and television. And so I took a year off between college and law school and did some TV internships for the first time, then went to law school. And then out of law school, got my first job as a TV reporter in Fargo, North Dakota, and worked my way up in the markets. And at various times talked with the networks. I always kind of imagined myself as a network correspondent. And when I was in what turned out to be my final television market, which was the Detroit NBC affiliate, at the time it was the 10th biggest market in the country. I ended up in a relationship with someone I thought I was going to marry. We were long distance. He lived in Minneapolis. And I actually left TV news to come back to Minneapolis thinking this is the person I was going to marry. And I don't share that too much, because I did come back to start my business, but that's a big reason why I made the business decision, was because I didn't want to return to Minneapolis to work in television news. I had already done that in Minneapolis before Detroit. So within a couple months of moving back, I actually left the guy. So I think I was supposed to come back, and it was something that big that made me come back and not keep on working toward getting to the network, and started my business in early 2006. And, that has led to me writing a book. It's led to formulating the different programs that I coach as an executive coach, and a main stage speaker life. And I fell in love with talk radio while I was in TV news. And I knew that I one day wanted to have my own talk show. And I really put it into my business plan in 2006, because I thought it would be a great platform for me, for my business, and to be able to stay connected to that media insider life. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, that career. And then 2006, early 2006 is when I started my company, and have been, going now. Next year will be 15 years. So it has been quite a journey, and it's been wonderful being a business owner, but it's also a very scary thing. I don't recommend it to everyone. And I know, Christy, you have had a lot of success with it, but it is not a get-rich-quick scheme.
No, and it's funny when I talk to young entrepreneurs or people with a business idea, and they when they finish the sentence with, and then I'm going to go public and get rich. it's like, you should never start this, because if you end it with, and then I'm going to go get rich, you're not going to be able to do the years when you're doing payroll yourself, or you're turning off your own salary because you need the money in the business, or you're one day away from paying the bills. All those things that you have to be so passionate about what you do so that you'll do it even if you don't get paid. The money will come. But right. I think that, that's the mistake that so many people make. And what I love about that whole story is that you are open to the future and what it might hold. You're not holding tight onto something, whether it's a relationship or a career. You're very open to, you followed your heart to Minnesota for love, and you found love. It's not with the person you thought it was going to be with, and you found the business and all these things. But it's so much of success in life and fulfillment is about being able to pivot and being able to see the next thing in a loose form, not a secure form.
Right. And, when I started my business, people said, did you always want to own a business? I said, no, absolutely not. That was never part of my plan A. But when I did make the decision to, like you say, pivot, flip your script, it was, how do I create the life I want to live? It wasn't, let's start a business. It's, how do I create the life I want to live? And that life included performance, so I'm on stages speaking now. During COVID times, a lot of that speaking is virtual. But when we go back, it will be on stage again. And the performance, continues on air as a talk show host. I do media commentary around the country for both television and radio and online outlets. So I'm still doing kind of that media work, but then having to create my services as an executive coach. That was really the entrepreneurial. That's really where I was a startup. I had to create these things and put that out there and sell it. And that's a continual process. Just when you think you're going to have your best year ever, which I did believe at the top of 2020, COVID happens, and it definitely hit us, in an economic way. But I can't let that get me down. I have a small team that I need to pay. I need to pay myself. And so now it's about, okay, how do we take these challenges? Where are our differentiators, and put those into the marketplace? And just so happens I'm a crisis coach and a strategic communication person. And right now, every business needs that, right? Every business needs to know how to navigate different kinds of conversations, whether they are courageous conversations about race and justice, or crisis because of what's happening and you have to save your brand, or you're getting sued about something and you're in crisis for that, or you don't want something happening to you that's bad that the media get a hold of, and then it turns it into its own viral mess. So all of those things are my sweet spot. So I'm really looking at, how do we put that out there in a productive way that's respectful and professional, and ultimately lead to the dollar signs.
And becoming an entrepreneur is about that scrappy grittiness. And just when you think, like you thought, okay, the beginning of 2020, it's going to be good. I've finally got it figured out. You're back to scrappy, gritty, bootstrap a little bit. Like, it's a constant reinvention of yourself, which you've done time and time again. And I think people who I've talked with that have had significant things happen in their life, they tend to do better with that unknown. They tend to do better with the difficult, because as you said earlier, you've already been through the worst possible thing you could think of, which is losing your dad as a child. So if that's the worst possible thing, then yeah, if my, balance sheet doesn't look as good as it used to, we'll figure it out.
Exactly. And knowing that you have the power to write your script. That's what's so important. And, my line is, own your wow. You do not need to worry what the world throws at you, what other people say about you. As long as you are owning your wow, you can write your script. Now, we all have down days, and there are days that it's tougher to do that. That's okay. But really growing that inner narrative and that self-confidence that you have the power to write that script, that's the secret sauce. And it is okay if you need some help in boosting that inner narrative. And sometimes, Christy, people go to you at Media Minefield for that. Sometimes they come to me. Sometimes they do yoga. Sometimes they do, they just need to go have a martini, whatever that is, or it's a combination. is really boosting that inner narrative so that you can go out and just rock it and be successful, and know that your definition of success is your definition of success. It's not really comparing with others. And, it is being scrappy and it is pivoting, and it doesn't have to be about money. But I will say, I do want that Porsche one day, Christy. That's been a dream since about the age of 16. I've actually loved cars since I was a little girl. My parents told me I had not Barbie dolls, but little Matchbox cars. So my memory is that at least as early as age 16, I've wanted the Porsche convertible, and that has not left me.
You'll give me a ride, right?
For sure. I'll pick you up. We'll go out for martinis.
There it is. Love it. That's a great place for me to ask the last question that I ask everyone on the podcast, which is there a quote or a book or something that got you through the difficult days when you needed a boost?
I don't know that there's just one. I will tell you that Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's a transcendentalist, has always really spoken to me. So ever since we started learning about him, maybe in junior high school, whatever it was, his words really speak to me. And they are in essence, I haven't read everything he's written, but they are in essence about the power of the individual. And it's okay sometimes if you're different or you're a nonconformist, there actually could be some fun and some power and some real productivity in being unique. So I would say he is an inspiration as a writer. And the concept that I got from Studio E, which is a Minneapolis-based learning community, they have more than 1,000 alumni now. I went through the Studio E program as my 10-year anniversary present to myself of my business. And the concept of being the only. So we've heard about the unicorn, but really being the only. And sometimes that's tough because when you're in a service business like I am, you have to sort of teach people sometimes, well, this is what I'm selling, but I'm the only one who does it. And I do it, even if there's someone else out there who's similar, I do it better than anyone. So that concept of being the only has really spoken to me. And so with all of the services that I put out there, I try to make sure they're unique, and you can't really find them anywhere else in the marketplace. And that's why they're of value. And that is something that I hope people think about, even in their personal lives. If you're the only, and in some cases you're the only for someone else, there's a lot of power and strength in that.
Thank you. It's lovely. And I want to make sure that people know the links to your TED Talk and your company and your talk show all will be on flipyourscriptpodcast.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Christy.
The beautiful thing about Roshini's story, there are so many gems and nuggets because she's lived a lot. The value of communication, the importance to write your own story, know that you have control, that sometimes plan B is better than plan A or can be better. And the importance of family as you define it, the beauty in intentionally leaning into family, creating a family unit, and know that every day has value and is a gift, and darn it, birthday should be celebrated. My hope is that Roshini's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Christy Peel and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also check out flipyourscriptpodcast.com for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and information about our other great episodes.